Let's do that hockey.
Welcome to another edition of Dobberprospects Radio. I'm your host, Peter Harling, and today I'm recording this on Monday, December 14th, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, which means we are right around the corner from the World Juniors, which, as you all know, is the most wonderful time of year. So this is the first episode of a series that will be coming out leading into the World Juniors, doing a little roster preview for all of the powerhouse countries, and I'm very pleased at this time to be joined by the first guest of this series, none other than Chris Peters from ESPN, and Chris has graciously enough agreed to come on and talk a little Team USA. So maybe we're going in reverse alphabetical order. Welcome to the show, Chris. Good to have you on, man.
Thanks a lot, Peter. It's good to be with you, and yeah, I'm happy to lead off.
Nice. Well, setting the bar high. I've met you a couple times at different games and events and drafts and stuff, and I've been meaning to get you on this podcast for a long time. So I don't know what took me so long to reach out the olive branch, but I appreciate you agreeing to come on the show with me. Thanks so much for your time again.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, this is like everybody. It's if you like prospects, the World Juniors is like Christmas around Christmas, so it's pretty great. It's doubly great. You get the presents and then you get the World Juniors. How can you ask for anything more than that?
Not only that, it's some of the best hockey I've ever seen.
For sure.
The World Junior Tournament is such great pace. It's like the Stanley Cup playoff pace. It's hard to keep in mind how young these kids are. I mean, you watch them on TV and it just doesn't really translate. It's like watching NASCAR on TV and seeing how fast they go, and then going to a live racing event and seeing it firsthand. It's quite different. And so you see these kids on the ice in the World Junior and they look like NHL players and pros, and some of them are. And then you go to a junior game and you meet the kids and interview them, and it's like, this guy looks like he's barely old enough to be in high school. I mean, they really are teenagers and kids, so it's quite remarkable, and the pace of play is fantastic. So those are some of the reasons why I've long been a fan of the World Juniors for decades, and the other reason why is because it's been a fantastic resource for farming and scouting for my fantasy hockey rosters. I don't know if you've got that little hidden layer of bonus from watching the World Juniors as well, but it's a great way to find players for your fantasy roster.
Yeah, it's such a unique tournament in the scope of sports. I mean, there are certainly things in soccer and basketball where they have U19, U23 kind of tournaments and things like that, but none of them get the national attention and the opportunity to watch all the games pretty easily on TV in the US and Canada, like the World Juniors does. And then, these guys are so close, and the NHL has continually gotten younger. Players that are, played in the World Juniors are on NHL rosters a season later. The players that have success at the World Junior Championship, by and large, are players that are going to have some level of success at the National Hockey League level as well. So, I mean, it really is a great opportunity to catch up with these players after most of them have been drafted. It's also usually a good year to check out draft eligible prospects. It's not going to be as good for that this year, based on what we've seen in terms of the rosters named, but it's as always a great look at players that have been in the most two recent drafts pretty much, and certainly you might see players that were taken in the second, third, fourth, fifth round, or players that were undrafted that make an impact at the World Junior level, and then you eventually hear their names later on when they're signing as free agents or getting drafted and as an overager, or if they're a lower draft pick, all of a sudden really popping on radars. So yeah, it's really great for those purposes for sure.
There's been a tremendous number of movie caliber storylines to come out of the World Juniors, and even just kind of the opposite of the point that you just made. it never ceases to amaze me how you can have some players who shine and can dominate a tournament at the World Juniors, and that is the pinnacle of their career. They don't get a sniff at the NHL, and this is their peak. Which kind of leads me to another topic that I kind of want to just touch on briefly is, should there even be a World Junior tournament this year? There's a lot of criticism about that on social media, that it shouldn't be going, which would be, it's understandable, but it would be a shame, because the point I just made, that this is it for some of these guys. This is the shining moment of their career.
Yeah, for sure.
There's been a lot of COVID casualties, kids who graduated high school last year, didn't get a prom. And like my kid's high school is doing a drive-through graduation ceremony where they drive through and get their diplomas. Like, I feel kind of bad about that, and everyone's got their belly aches about it. What are your thoughts on whether or not we should be having a World Junior?
Yeah, I've really gone back and forth on it over the course of the whole process. And I think really what it comes down to is you can have the tournament if you're going to take every single possible precaution. You will spare no expense in the name of health and safety. You will, but the thing is that the coronavirus, as we found out, you cannot guarantee that. You cannot guarantee safety. You cannot guarantee that the players won't get the illness and potentially spread it around. There's obviously very strict quarantine and other protocols in Canada that are being waived to have this tournament. Players don't have to wait 14 days to quarantine in Canada like they did, like some people did, or any media that came from the US that went to Canada would have to. The IIHF decided for whatever reason that they were going to have 3 teams per plane on the way over here from Europe, which ended up causing travel issues just before they all arrived. And there was a chance that the Finnish team wasn't going to get on the plane because they didn't have enough room in the cargo hold for all the equipment, and they were going to put the equipment in the cabin, and then that was going to squish all the players closer together. And so that was a fiasco. And I thought that was one of the moments for me that I said, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And is it worth it? Because let's face it, the only reason this is happening, the only reason this tournament, then everybody's going to all this trouble, is to make sure that the TV rights money and the advertising money is made. And they're not going to make the ticket money, which is one of the biggest drivers of revenue in the tournament. They're not going to have that, but if they at least can turn some level of profit on this, then Hockey Canada and the IIHF as the host nation and the governing body will have money that is then filtered to other things that are important. And I'm not, they're not just doing it because they want to stick it in their own pockets. This tournament helps fund other things. But the IIHF, has canceled many other tournaments, including the women's under 18 World Championship, which is a top level tournament, and then all of the other U20 and U18 tournaments that don't get as much notoriety because they're not played by the big countries. So, so that's kind of the thing. And I know I'm going on and on here, but I think it's important because the players are the ones that assume, the players and the coaches are the ones that assume most of the risk. The players are the ones that the benefit to having the tournament is experience. It's not money. It's not, they are not making money off of this. They are not getting the benefit of anything really outside of the experience. And every single player that are on those planes had no problem getting on those planes. They were more than willing to do it. It's worth it to them. But I think the IIHF has a responsibility to do right by their players. And I think this travel situation was a red flag for me. Also, kind of some of the testing protocols have been really, they're really strict, but they're also a bit flawed because, as we've seen, some players have tested positive in camp. They turned out to be false positives, and they ended up, they couldn't come to the World Juniors. But as we saw with William Eklund from Sweden, he was playing a few days after he was released from camp. And because, he was able to take an additional test. So, player or countries have lost players that may have tested positive, but might not have been a true positive. So there are so many different things. And so this is a long way for me to say, again, like I said at the beginning, that I've gone back and forth on it, and I remain very conflicted about it because I am a fan of the tournament and I want to see the tournament. But I also think that there has to be the proper steps taken. And what I've seen so far doesn't lead me to believe that the IIHF has done everything in their power to make this the best, the safest possible environment for these players. And that's, upsetting to me. And it to me taints the tournament a little bit.
Yeah, I really on the same page as you are here. I desperately want the tournament to go because I love it so much, and it's such an important part of the hockey season. And the storylines that come out of it are just fantastic, and the quality of hockey is excellent. These players are the ones who they're in the tournament. They're taking the risk, and not only that, but they're leaving their families over Christmas as well, and so they're not doing it for the monetary gains, like you said. So I'm like, yeah, man. And the NHL had their playoff bubble, and they proved that it can be very effective. So one side of me is like, all in, absolutely. What's the question? And then the other side of me is like, well, people are dying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, like, when you put it in perspective, like, and the thing is there are coaches that are older, there are, support staff that are older that are coming to this thing. You start worrying and saying, if anybody gets sick because of this tournament, because of, in transit or whatever. And the other thing too, Peter, right now is we're still waiting to find out to make sure all of the tests that come in between now and when over these next 4 days, players are in their hotel rooms, they're isolated, they're all by themselves in their hotel rooms for these next 4 days. They have to test out of quarantine. And so we don't know if we're going to have positives. We had, the Swedish camp was plagued by positive cases. They lost 4 coaches and 3 players. And Germany lost 4 players, and Switzerland lost players, and Austria lost a player. The U.S. lost 2 players. So, like, everybody started losing players. We obviously saw Canada's camp get paused. And it just goes to show you that no matter how many precautions you take, and if you testing alone is not going to prevent you from getting the coronavirus in your camp, so or in your tournament. So that is the concern at this point. And really, if there is a positive case within the tournament, I think there are protocols in place to isolate that situation. But as we saw in Canada's camp, where they had, a staff member get it, 2 players get it, and then have to be sent home, and then their close contacts had to be sent home. All that is very concerning to me. And then in the grand scheme, and as you mentioned, in the background, people are dying. There are, hospitals are overrun. The province of Alberta right now is under some of the strictest coronavirus protocols it's had since the beginning of the pandemic. And yet we're going to have a tournament there where we're bringing people from all over the country and using resources for that. It's not government resources, but it's resources that are, for the IIHF, for Hockey Canada, for all those different organizations that need to make money, that are nonprofit organizations by technically. So there's a lot of conflicted feelings about it. I'll continue to cover it if it happens. But I'm also going to make sure that I think most, journalists that are going to cover this are going to, hold the IIHF and Hockey Canada and all the member nations accountable for anything that, was preventable that they didn't either think of or anything like that. Because they're the ones that are benefiting from the players who are willingly putting themselves at risk for experience.
Well, I think it can work if the players follow all the protocols and take this very seriously. And the fact that they're risking their health and sacrificing Christmas, and you watch the gold medal game and you see the elation and joy on the players' faces that win it, and then the camera pans down and shows the losers all slumped along the boards and hanging their heads on the over the bench, crying their eyes out. They're heartbroken, and so that the players take this seriously, and almost nothing in the world means anything more to them right now. So I'd like to think that passion and determination to make this tournament and succeed at it forces them easily, not forces them, it makes it easy for them to, take the protocol seriously and isolate and not sneak out and meet their girlfriend or go for drinks or whatever. They just stay in the room and play Xbox when they're not on the ice.
Yeah.
So that's enough of the COVID side of the tournament for this entire series of episodes. I've been a really good job of avoiding COVID on this podcast. That is a conscious choice. But let's talk about the roster now. Team NCAA or Team USA. Let's go positionally. Let's start in goal. It seems to be Spencer Knight's crease. His to lose. Dustin Wolf, I think, will be his strongest competition and could see some spot starts. Tell me a little bit about Logan Stein. I'm not terribly familiar with him. He's an undrafted free agent player at 19 years old. He's playing in Ferris State U. What's the story on this guy?
Yeah, well, the reason Logan Stein is on the roster is because Drew Comesso, who was initially named to the team, was not going to be able to come to camp because Boston University had COVID issues. They were in, their team was in COVID protocol. And so 3 invitees to USA's camp, which was Comesso, Robert Mastro-Simone, and Alex Vlasic, all had to bow out of the camp. And so Comesso was the clear number 3 second-round draft pick of the Chicago Blackhawks, a guy that will probably be the starter next year. And he was supposed to be there. So Logan Stein comes in, and you're right, undrafted. He's I think he's the first player from the modern day WCHA, or maybe the second, to make a U.S. national team roster. And he had a pretty solid, not spectacular, but solid junior career. Obviously didn't get drafted, but he went to Ferris State. He's expected to play a pretty substantial role there as a freshman. He did play in the World Junior A Challenge and had a really nice tournament there last year, and got some really good reps. And so that is kind of how he got into the mix for this team. And he was, the goalie that they invited to their fall camp, the 4th goalie that they invited to their fall camp that they had back in October. So, he's got plenty of talent, plenty of skill. I think that the chances of him playing are next to none as long as everybody's healthy, because you've got Spencer Knight and Dustin Wolf. You got the guy who was the best collegiate freshman in the country last year in net and a first-round draft pick. And then you got Dustin Wolf, who was the CHL goalie of the year. So, I mean, that's a pretty solid tandem for Team USA.
Canada is envious. Do you think it's more surprising that Logan Stein made the World Junior roster or that he went undrafted?
Probably more that he made the World Junior roster, just because, I mean, really, if Comesso was healthy, well, I don't even think that, as far as I know, he himself did not test positive. But as far as I know, he would have been on the roster. So, I never saw anything from Logan Stein over the years that said, hey, this guy is absolutely going to get drafted. I think that we've had a lot of unique goaltenders over the years, in these last couple of years. And the crowded field, he never really stood out to me as a guy that people missed on. Now, he could certainly go ahead and have himself a career at Ferris State. He's going to get plenty of reps there. He's going to see plenty of pucks. And certainly could work his way into the mix as a college free agent. But I still think there's enough development ahead of him where I didn't see any issue with him not getting drafted. And I'm certainly, I never anticipated that he would end up making this team. But at the same time, I think based on the goalie pool, he deserves to be there.
Cool. I would look at their goaltending and say this is an A to an A+ rating goaltending roster that USA has to go with. I think Spencer Knight would get the gold medal game should they make it that far. But if he kind of has an Askarov-like World Junior performance from last year and is a little shaky, they're going to be just fine going with Dustin Wolf. Let's talk about the blue line a little bit. I don't know where to start here. Okay, so Jake Sanderson, Ottawa
Mm-hmm.
Senators, top 5 pick in the draft, first defenseman taken in the 2020 draft. He looks like he'll be one of the anchors for this roster, along with possibly Cam York, who's with the University of Michigan, Philadelphia Flyers first round pick from 19. Different kind of players. York's a little bit more offensive, and Sanderson's a little bit more all around. But a lot of chatter about Sanderson and on his rise through the draft rankings this past season, and that his offensive game is a little underrated. And playing on the United States national development team didn't really allow him a lot of opportunity to show his offensive chops. And as a freshman at North Dakota, he's already got 3 points in 3 games. So that kind of lends a little bit of, and it's a very small sample size, but it still lends a little bit of merit to that statement. Do you think that Sanderson has understated offensive upside?
I do, and I've been saying that, probably since last February, and just having watched him enough, and also understanding the numbers for that particular U18 team last year. They just did not score a lot of goals as a team. I mean, like, that team did not have a lot of firepower up front. Whereas, Cam York the year before could send a stretch pass to one of Cole Caulfield, Matt Boldy, Alex Turcotte, Jack Hughes, all these, Trevor Zegras, multiple top first round draft picks. And that was not the case for Jake Sanderson last year. But, he really shined in situations where the spotlight was on him, like at the under-18 Five Nations in February, at the All-American Prospects game, and really throughout the latter portion of the season. He really seemed to be hitting his stride offensively. And I really think that he'll end up being USA's number 1 defenseman in this tournament. I think he's young still. I mean, it's his first, he probably could have made the team last year. And there's actually an interesting story. I think I shared this with Tony Ferrari, if I'm not mistaken. But I think, basically, I after the U20 team got together last year in Plymouth, they scrimmaged the under-18 team. And they kind of put some of the World Junior guys on the under-18 team just to kind of fill out their roster and stuff and make sure everybody's getting enough ice time. But I know several scouts that were in the building for that said after that game was over, they said, hey, to the U.S. staff, you're like, you guys might want to take Sanderson to the tournament with you because he was the best player on the ice. And so I think that Nate Lehman, the head coach, who just really does value such a strong defensive game, is going to use Jake Sanderson in all situations. I'm not 100% positive that he'll end up being on the top power play. I think that'll be Cam York, but at the same time, I think you've got a spot for Sanderson on your power play unit. You also would use him in as one of your top penalty killers. I think defensively he's elite. So he's just so well rounded. And the games that I've watched so far this year, where with North Dakota, he just easily transitioned into college hockey. Looked like he'd been playing at that level for a long time, was just completely unfazed by the level of competition, which was very high, and played big minutes for a team that has, other top defensemen. They have the number 1 undrafted free agent, I think, in college hockey this year, in Matt Kiersted. They have Jacob Bernard-Docker, former first-round draft pick and a junior. So like the fact that he's playing such a big role as a freshman isn't surprising given his draft pedigree. But the fact that he's as good as he is just further proof that this is a kid that deserved to go where he went in the draft last year.
Well, I know some Sens fans might have been a little disappointed that he was the player that the Sens picked at 5th overall, and if they had to take a defenseman, a lot of the Sens fans in Canada were thinking Jamie Drysdale, come on, no brainer. So they're going to be looking forward to getting an opportunity to see Jake Sanderson at the World Juniors. And that's not the only Sens defensive prospect they'll get to look at. Tyler Kleven played last season with Jake Sanderson with the U.S. team, and now they're in North Dakota as freshmen together, drafted by the Ottawa Senators together, and they're at the World Juniors together. Tyler Kleven made the team. So he's a very different kind of player, very big defensive, physical defenseman. He's got a goal already though in his 3 games in the NCAA. Yeah. So what kind of was it really? I didn't see it.
It was, yeah, it was awesome. It was highlight reel.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, toe drag shot. So Kleven is one of those guys where he did not make the roster initially. Alex Vlasic being knocked out made space for him. They brought in him and Hunter Skinner on the blue line, and he edged out a player, Cam McDonald, who was named to the camp roster, was cut. And so, and he's, one of Nate Lehman's own defensemen from Providence. And so, Tyler Kleven came into the camp. He's, you mentioned all the combinations with Jake Sanderson. They live together. They're very close friends. And I think, one of the things I heard the coaching staff talk about is how much Jake Sanderson rubbed off on Tyler Kleven in terms of, setting an example for work ethic and the ability to hone your skills. And there are 2 things that have stood out so far with Tyler Kleven's early on at North Dakota, where he was playing, essentially, he was kind of on the bottom pairing, but he was playing a regular shift and was playing good minutes. He has the size, he has physicality and nastiness, but his mobility has looked vastly improved from a year ago. I think that's one of the key things that may have been holding him back, is that he needed to, his stride was a little heavy. I think his there's a more fluidity to his stride now. There's, a quickness to his feet, not necessarily, I don't think anybody's going to call him fast, but he's just, his footwork has improved. He's always been really good in terms of spacing and angling and, putting forwards into a bad position where he's going to take the puck from them. And so that's been evident at the college level. That's a lot harder to do when you're coming, from junior hockey, and the timing is a little different. It's a little harder. The physicality of the players that you're going up against is higher. So you have to be a little bit better. And then, as I mentioned, he scored an absolutely beautiful goal where it was a toe drag into a wrist shot that was just an absolute snipe. And I think his hands have looked better. So, as I was watching him, it was funny that, the things worked out in the camp, but Kleven was a guy for me that I thought, whoa, he should have been in camp. They missed him, and then they kind of luck out and are able to get him. And I think that he's going to go from being a guy that was on the outside looking in to potentially, he might end up being the 7th defenseman, just because I think there's decent depth on the blue line. And there are some guys that are a little more offensively gifted that are going to get some more run, but he's impressive. And I've been, it's only 3 games of his collegiate career, but he looked really, really good in the games that I saw. And I think that he could potentially play his way into a more substantial role for this team.
Well, he is an 18-year-old, so he's got that working against him. But he is, like we've said, line mates with Jake Sanderson for years. So those 2 will have a tremendous amount of chemistry, I would imagine. So let's talk about some of the potential D pairings. You've got Sanderson and Kleven that played together forever. You've got a whole bunch of guys from University of Minnesota, and Brock Faber, Ryan Johnson, and
Jackson LaCombe.
Jackson LaCombe is the other one, yeah.
Yep.
So do you think there could be potential for some familiarity pairings on the defensive groups?
There will be. Cam York and Henry Thurn played together at the National Team Development Program. They're both left shot defensemen, both more offensive minded. Thurn was one of the top scoring freshman defensemen in college hockey last year at Harvard. And because Harvard had to cancel their season, he's playing for the Dubuque Fighting Saints in the USHL this year, and hasn't necessarily jumped off the page so far this season. But I think that that's going to be a pair. Sanderson very well could play some with Kleven, but I think, in camp, he's been used more with Drew Helleson, who's one of the 3 right shot defensemen on the team. And Helleson's a much more defensive minded guy, but makes a good first pass and has some physicality. So, I think that you could definitely see Sanderson and Helleson getting major minutes against top lines. But they also have a really good potential for a matchup pairing in Ryan Johnson and Brock Faber, who are paired together at the University of Minnesota. Johnson, I did not love what I saw from him last year. I thought that, for a first-round pick, I thought that there just wasn't enough offensive game for him last year. This year, he's played for Minnesota. Minnesota hasn't lost a game yet. And he looked fantastic. And I thought he really looked good with Faber. And both of those guys tend to be more defensive minded and more definitely, better as a kind of like a shutdown unit, but they have enough skill to make some plays. So, I think that's going to be really interesting. I think Kleven and LaCombe could be a pair. LaCombe is a left shot that plays on the right side at Minnesota. And then you also have Hunter Skinner, who's a right shot. So I think that'll be really interesting to kind of see where everything goes with that D group. But I think that you're going to probably see heavy doses of Jake Sanderson. You should see quite a bit of Cam York. And I think, Ryan Johnson is a guy that at other levels, particularly at the World Junior A Challenge, when the U.S. Won it a couple of years ago, he was in charge of shutting down top lines from Russia at the World Junior A Challenge. And he did a phenomenal job of that. And that really helped kind of propel him in the draft as a guy who could be elite shutdown defenseman. But this year we've seen a little bit more offense from him. So I think the U.S. group as a whole, it's not necessarily dynamic offensively. It has enough firepower back there, but they have some really incredible defenders and can have a lot of flexibility with the matchups that they can play with that group.
Yeah, they certainly don't have a shortage of defensemen. 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah,
6,
9
7,
of them.
8, 9. You can only play 3 in a game. So unless some of those guys can play forward at the same time, there'll be a couple of them in the press box. But I imagine that they might just rotate through a couple of them, with maybe the top 4 being 3 or 4 being an every game lock.
Yeah.
Let's move up front. So the first player I want to talk about at forward is a draft eligible player. So I might be encroaching a little bit on Tony's podcast here, but that's okay. So Matthew Benya is University of Michigan. He's 18 years old. He's 21 draft eligible, and he's freshman, and he's already got 6 points in 8 NCAA games with University of Michigan, who's turning some heads. Tell me a little bit about this player.
Well, he's one of those players that always stands out in a game. And it's not always because of a highlight reel play. It's just that his motor just never stops. He's got really good speed. He's physical. He's strong. He does have skill. He has incredible intelligence. And, I think, the University of Michigan has, 3 guys that could be top 10 picks in the draft this year. Owen Power, who's getting some number 1 love. Kent Johnson, and then Matty Beniers. And I think Beniers has probably been pound for pound the best player. Maybe he's not the best prospect in terms of upside compared to Power and Johnson. However, he has been the best of those 3 players in the games that he's played for Michigan. And now he was supposed to go to Harvard this season, had to decommit kind of at the late because of the situation with, Harvard's season being at risk. It wasn't canceled at that point. And then he obviously made the right decision to go to Michigan where he could play games. So, he's more than likely going to be USA's number 2 center behind Alex Turcotte. According to the players in camp, Beniers spent quite a bit of time between Matt Boldy and Cole Caulfield. So that's a scoring line role. And he has that ability in him. You mentioned he had the 6 points. I think, he's the guy that even if he doesn't get the assist is going to have had an impact on the goal because he was in on the forecheck, or he disrupted a play, or he forced the turnover at the other end of the ice. Those are the types of things that I think Matty Beniers does so well. And you just can trust him in any situation. He can be a PK guy for you. He can be on the power play. He's not a humongous player by physical stature, but he's just so strong. And he just has that motor and that speed. And those are the things that makes him a guy that I think a lot of teams are going to look at. And he very well could be a top 5 pick in this year's draft. I think I had him, a little bit lower than that to start this season. But the more I've watched him and the things that he does, I mean, he just does so many different things that help you win hockey games that I know that the coaching staff is going to lean on him heavily in this tournament.
Yeah, he's having a very impressive season. Really want to watch some University of Michigan games. They've got They've got a lot of players to watch. What kind of role do you think he'll have on USA's roster this tournament?
I think we'll see him. I think it's going to be a scoring line role. And I think he's going to be a guy that probably is on one of the power play units. I could see. I think he'll probably be on a PK, and I'm sure that his PK will have the green light to try and create offense as well off of the PK. And that's something that he absolutely can do. So I mean, I think he's going to play a pretty substantial role. I think number 2 center and basically a guy that can do just about anything you need him to.
2 of the top guns on USA's roster are just kind of backing into this tournament because they haven't played a game yet this year. So they haven't played in almost 9 months, and that's Alex Turcotte and Trevor Zegras. Clearly, these guys are going to be the 2 of the players, anyways, that are the straw that stirs the drink offensively for USA. Both of them have signed their pro contracts, which is why they're not playing in the NCAA this year. I think there's any chance that these guys could be a little bit rusty compared to everyone else that's got games under their belt?
It's certainly possible. I mean, think one of the things that I've kind of noticed in the games that I've watched of whether they've been in camp, and we weren't able to see anything from the USA camp, so I wasn't able to watch them specifically. They have been skating. They've been, Zegras has been with Anaheim for the last 3 months. He's been skating with players at their facility. So he's been around NHL players, and that definitely helps. I mean, that's something that's good. Alex Turcotte actually got some time with Berlin in the DEL during their training camp and did get into a couple, at least 1 or 2 exhibition games for Berlin. So he's at least played a little bit. But and I think one of the most valuable things for both of those guys is that coming into this tournament and this being the first action that they play, it's at such a high level, and these guys have been kind of ramping up to this point, and they both have a sour taste in their mouth for how last year went. Now, Zegras was awesome in last year's tournament. He led the tournament in assists. He was made so many highlight reel plays and really had to earn his way up the lineup on last year's team. This year, he's going to be a first-line player. It sounds like he's actually going to play on the wing, and Turcotte will probably be his center, and they'll probably have Arthur Kaliev on the other wing. So that is, likely USA's top unit. They're going to play a lot, and Zegras and Kaliev had some chemistry last year. And Turcotte has played with Zegras, at the National Team Development Program. And these guys have a bit of a burr in their saddle because of the way last year went, and also because of 2 years ago at the Under-18 World Championship, Yaroslav Askarov stole a gold medal right off their necks from the World Under-18 Championship, as he stopped 3 top 15 picks in one shootout, and Spencer Knight only let in 1 at the other end. And so these guys, this is their last opportunity to play together, with Cole Caulfield, with Patrick Moynihan's on the team, Cam York, Henry Thurn, guys, Spencer Knight, these are their buddies that they played with. And the 01 birth year for USA is legendary just because of what they did as U18s, but they don't have any gold medals to show for it. So I think those 2 guys are really ready to go. And I think Alex Turcotte, I was really glad to hear him say this year, because I felt it last season, and I just don't know if he was ready to admit it yet, but he tried to do way too much last season. He put way too much on his shoulders. He put way too much pressure on himself. This year, he knows there's a lot expected of him, but he knows that he's got to be bought in to the process and everything else, because, last year he never got going. They didn't really find a good role for him. They didn't find good line mates for him, but he needed to be better than he was. He knows that, and I think that will help lead him to a better tournament this year.
All right, let's do a little throwback to one of my early episodes when Paul was my co-host, and we did Who Would You Rather. So let's do Who Would You Rather have on your fantasy roster, Alex Turcotte or Trevor Zegras, because it's a coin toss for me.
For me, it's pretty easily Zegras, and that's changed since their draft year. I mean, I had Turcotte as a top 4 pick in that draft. He ended up going 5th, so not far off. But I think what you have just in terms of fantasy, I think Zegras has the more dynamic player. I think he's more than likely going to be moved. I think he'll probably end up playing more on the wing in the NHL level. He can play center, but I think he's probably going to be a wing. And I think that allows him to open up his game offensively. He's got some of the best hands outside of the NHL. I think he's one of the best passers. He's a guy that's going to rack up a ton of assists. Incredible vision and creativity. And Alex Turcotte is much more of the, I don't want to compare him to Jonathan Toews because that's not really, he's not at that level, and he wasn't at that level in his draft year, but he's more of the guy that's, it's more about work ethic than skill. He has vision, he has incredible hockey sense, but the work ethic is what carries him. And so his hand skills aren't as advanced as Zegras, but he makes a lot of plays. I think he's probably, he might be a better goal scorer, I think, because he gets in tight to the net. He goes to the hard areas and he makes, he works for his offense. But I just think that, if you're thinking fantasy wise points, it's probably Zegras by a fair margin for me, just offensively. I think the better all around player is Turcotte, but Zegras is absolutely an offensive dynamo.
Nice. Yeah, I like him too because his opportunity in Anaheim is less blocked with competition than Turcotte's in LA. All right, round 2. Who would you rather, Arthur Kaliev or Cole Caulfield?
Ooh, this is tough because they are both incredible goal scorers. But man, I lean Caulfield. And the reason I do is because I think one of the things I've seen at Wisconsin this year is he's taking the puck a lot more himself. He's not, he's not forcing his center to create things for him. I think at this tournament, just because of the way Matty Beniers plays, that he will create. Beniers will be the one creating a lot of the, carrying the puck a lot. He'll be the one driving the line. But I think we've seen Caulfield this year at Wisconsin drive his line. He's making plays with his hands. He's making plays with his feet. He's getting back defensively and taking pucks off of guys. He's a better skater than Kaliev. And he has, they're both have absolute weapons in terms of shots. Kaliev has the size advantage. I think his one-timer is better. And I think that he has, I don't think there's anybody outside of the NHL that I've seen recently that shoots off the pass as well as Arthur Kaliev. So, they're really tight, but I think that Caulfield has a little more dynamic element to him and is a better skater and has a little bit more of a motor. But Kaliev is going to play. And I think, this year in particular, I think Los Angeles may give him a shot to see if he can stick. If not, he goes back to junior, but I don't think he's that far away. And he's a power play weapon. He'll play, I think he'll be a top unit power play guy. I've talked to the Kings. They love what they've seen from him. They've never really had a player quite like him. And so I think that he's a guy that's really exciting. But if we're going between the two, it's Caulfield for me.
Yeah, I'm more of a Caulfield fan for sure. I've seen Arthur Kaliev play live a couple of times, and there's a few things in his game that I've seen that really worries me. So I take Cole Caulfield every day, and not to say that Kaliev can't mature and grow out of those lapses that he has in his game. But if you just watch the highlight reel, it's pretty hard to pick between the two of them. That's for sure.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about Matt Boldy. He's in his second season in the NCAA. He had a bit of a slow start last year, I believe, but he finished pretty strong with 26 points in 34 games. And he's been on fire out of the gate this year with Boston College with 2 points a game pace, 3 goals and 5 assists and through 4 games. He looks like he is just trending straight up, and maybe Minnesota's got themselves a bit of a player here. What's your take on Boldy?
Yeah, I never even when he was going through his soft spell last year where just nothing was going right for him at the beginning of the season. He had a good first game and really just trailed off after that. Didn't end up making the World Junior team. I still thought they should have brought him just because I know what he's capable of. But this year we've seen the real Matt Boldy, and we saw it at the end of last season too. The biggest benefit to this season's Matt Boldy is he has not yet played with Alex Newhook this year, which he did last year. And Newhook really helped get Boldy going last year. Now Boldy's going on his own. He's driving a line. He is an excellent defensive winger, a high-end defensive winger who can play on your PK. But then he's also this, 6'2" kind of, lanky frame with incredible hand skills for a player of that size. And he makes a lot of plays in tight spaces. Excellent vision and a high-end shot. So he's got all of the tools. He's, his skating, he doesn't have quickness in terms of his skating. He's not, I think he's got some decent power in his stride. I think he can, get where he needs to go. He's not slow. He makes plays and can, make sure that he's making good decisions with his brain, and then the feet kind of have to catch up to that, catch up to his hands and his hockey sense. But, I think he's going to play a pretty significant role on this team as well. I think he's just one of those guys that you can put him kind of anywhere and he's going to find a way to produce. And that's what we've seen at Boston College this year. And I think that was really important to see. It was important for him to come into the tournament with that level of confidence, because I think that was part of the issue last year is, the college game, if you don't get it going early, it can really start to eat you up, and you're playing against older, stronger players, and it's really difficult. But I think that guys like Boldy in particular, he needed to get going, and going with Newhook really helped him. It made his game better. I thought Newhook was the best player in college hockey for the second half of last season. And Boldy was not terribly far behind based on what he was able to do with Newhook. And now this year we saw him do it on his own. And that's a really important thing for Matt Boldy.
I want to say he's one of the hottest rising prospects in the past two seasons. But I mean, he was only drafted in 2019 and he was the 12th overall pick in that draft. So it's not like he's come out of nowhere. But I just feel like even though he is a high end draft choice with a pedigree, I feel like he's really raised his game, and he seems bound for greatness. So a quick recap on some of the forwards that we've talked about here. We're looking at Turcotte and Zegras on a first line with possibly Arthur Kaliev, and that sounds lethal. And now we're talking about some players who I think would be penciled in on the second line. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Cole Caulfield can't get any lower than top six.
No.
What we just said about Matt Boldy sounds like he could be on flanking him on the other side. And then you've got probably Matthew Beignets, who we've been talking about right off the top as a draft eligible player at 18 years old. Could he lock down center on the second line on this roster?
Oh yeah. I think that's a no doubter. He's going to play a lot, and I think that the thing that I love about that line with Beniers, Caulfield, and Boldy is the balance, because you've got Beniers, who's the guy that will go and battle and get the puck. He's good at both ends of the ice, as is Boldy. Caulfield, obviously, you want him for his offense. You want him to be freed up for the shot. You want him to be out wide and making plays and getting pucks to the net. And you've got two guys that can absolutely get him the puck in Boldy, who's so good at creating extra time and space, in addition to, just the intelligence that he plays with, just the ability to suck in defenders. It's going to really help Caulfield be the guy that's the go-to scorer on that line. But yeah, so that's the thing that I love about that group. And when I heard that line was a possibility, it just made so much sense. So, I could see it on the ice already, just because of the balance that comes with it.
All right, so that's wildly impressive top six. They've got 7 players vying for the bottom 6 in Brett Berard, Bobby Brink, Brendan Brisson, Sam Colangelo, John Farinacci, Patrick Moynihan, and Landon Slaggert. So one of these guys is going to be in the press box every night, and they might rotate that. World Junior teams tend not to. If they have 4 good lines that they think have good chemistry and all contribute, they tend not to mess with that. Another thing that stands out to me about this roster is there's a number of 18-year-old players. Slaggert's 18, Colangelo's 18, Brendan Brisson, I think, just turned 19, but he was just drafted, so he's basically 18. Brett Berard is 18 as well. I feel like it's a little bit of a younger roster than what the States tends to bring. They usually go with their 19-year-olds, kind of like Russia that way.
Yeah, and I think if they had their way, they might have had more 19-year-olds. And one guy we haven't mentioned, John Beecher, unable to be playing in the tournament because he tested positive for COVID. He took a subsequent test, I believe, came back negative, but one positive and you're out. And so that's really unfortunate for him because he was a returning player. He did have a 1-game suspension that he would have had to have served that came from last tournament. In the quarterfinal with Finland, he got suspended. But he would have made the team and would have probably been on that third line and been another 19-year-old. They also lost Nick Robertson, who would have been on the team last year. Toronto's not releasing him. So those two guys certainly would have, no doubters on the roster. And then I think Thomas Bordeleau, who was in USA's camp, and he's another 18-year-old who's been one of the most impressive freshmen in the country so far this year with some of the plays that he's made for Michigan. He was Beecher's roommate. He gets knocked out because he's a close contact of a confirmed positive. And that's just, that really devastates Team USA's top 9 because I think Bordeleau, Robertson, and Beecher probably would have been on there. So, I mean, that's why we're seeing kind of this discrepancy. And so the U.S. has 13 forwards that they're able to bring. Typically a U.S. roster has 7 defensemen, 13 forwards dressed because you can dress, 20 in your roster for the World Juniors. And so they usually go with a 13, and that was the intention, was to go 7, 13, in the lineup. They were going to bring 8 defensemen, 14 forwards, and had to change plans because of COVID-19 and because the Maple Leafs wouldn't release Robertson. All these different things kind of come into play. And I think, you look at guys like Berard, guys like Slaggert, and you say, okay, they're good players. Would they have made it otherwise? And I'm not sure that they would have. But I think that they bring Slaggert in particular is one of the prototypical USA hockey guys that play on the fourth line. Great work ethic. I've loved what I've seen from him at Notre Dame so far this year. I think their freshmen have been some of their best players, and that includes Slaggert. And then Berard had a tough outing. The unfortunately, I hate to bring this up, but it was just this incredible stat, and I think he's a phenomenal young player and is going to be really good. But over the years, but he plays for Nate Lehman at Providence. And the last game they played, Boston College, they lost 9-0. He was on the ice for 8 of the goals against, and so that was a tough learning experience for a freshman player. To put a -8 up. And we don't read into plus minus all that closely, but in a single game environment and there's a snowman there, it's pretty notable. But I think he's a very intelligent player. He's going to learn. But I think that those kind of guys are going to be on the depth of the lineup. It's going to be really interesting to see where guys like Brendan Brisson, John Farinacci, Sam Colangelo line up, because they have particularly Farinacci has a pretty diverse skill set, and then Brisson and Colangelo are certainly more offensively minded players and played together with the Chicago Steel last year. So very well could see those two guys together as well.
Nice. Like you said earlier, I do think the United States has something to prove in this tournament. They've had a couple of years now of disappointment, and they've long now been a team or a nation on the rise. And it's really nice to welcome them into the elite international circle or consideration for ice hockey. And I think this should be a statement tournament for this particular group of players. Like you were saying, they have so much expectation for them, and at the international stage, particularly the World Juniors, these guys have not really got the result that they want. It's a tough tournament, and if they don't win the gold, not everybody can, right? There's some other there are some other really, really, really great teams every year in this tournament. So there's always going to be some heartbreak, but I don't underestimate the Americans, and they are a legitimate gold medal contender, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, Canada on paper, with the exception of the goaltending, I think they're better at every position. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the team that wins the gold medal. And so I think that the U.S. has a team that can skate with Canada. They're not in the same group to start. So, the soonest they would see them is probably, late in the tournament in those all crucial, all important games, the ones that always scare you a little bit, because I think sometimes getting to the gold medal game is the harder part than actually playing in that game. So, it's amazing to see what this tournament's going to look like. I'm excited for the field. I think the U.S. absolutely has an opportunity to contend for gold. I think that they would have had a better opportunity if some of the guys that I mentioned that had been knocked out of the tournament were available to them. But at the same time, they certainly have depth to absorb those losses. And then you just look at, will Russia get the benefit of Yaroslav Askarov just going off in this tournament? I think that's possible. Does Sweden have enough firepower with all the losses they've had due to COVID-19, and also having their coach not able to travel with them? There are so many questions coming into this tournament, but that's the great thing about the World Juniors is we're going to get answers. We'll probably read into them too much than we should, how that goes, where we take way too much and put an emphasis on these 7 games that these teams play. But at the same time, that margin for error is one of the great things that provides the drama and the storylines that I can't wait to follow in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, it's a short tournament. It's only a couple weeks long, and the medal round is you lose one and you're done. It's not a best of 7. You can't come back from a loss in a medal round game. So one of the many reasons why I like it, and storylines and characters and legends that come out of the World Juniors, and it is the most wonderful time of the year. So can't wait for the tournament to start and dig into some of my upcoming episodes. I think the next episode I'm going to record will be talking Team Canada with Craig Button from TSN. So strong start to my World Junior podcast series. Chris, thanks so much. And Chris Peters is the prospect writer for ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris M. Peters. And Chris, anything else you want to plug or mention about where we can find your work?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. So, yeah, we're going to definitely have some World Junior coverage at ESPN.com. And I'm obviously on Twitter, very, very, very active during the World Juniors. So, and always glad to interact with people as well. So if you have questions about Team USA or just the tournament in general, always happy to answer those. And yeah, Peter, this is awesome. Thanks so much for having me. And I think I can't wait to listen to the other episodes as well, because this is going to be a lot of fun this tournament.
It sure is. I can't wait to have the conversations and record them. So thanks for listening to Dobberprospects Radio. If you like the show, hit the subscribe button, share it on social media, give me a 5-star review, all that fun stuff. Make sure you check out Dobber's Draftcast with Tony Ferrari. That's great stuff too. It focuses more on the draft eligible players, and I kind of focus a little bit more on some of the fantasy side and a little bit wider of a spectrum. So thanks for listening. Check those podcasts out. Give Chris a follow on Twitter, and have a safe and Merry Christmas, and enjoy the World Juniors, everybody. See you on the next episode. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.